Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this very, very difficult time. I see many, many people here, and that gives me a sense of strength that there's people around the world, especially in the US, who feel the pain that we feel and that are interested in supporting the work of Roots and understanding the position that we now find ourselves. So during this presentation, I will be speaking. My Palestinian partner and colleague and friend, Noor Awad, will be speaking. It's hard to say, but I think I will speak about 20 or 25 minutes, and Noor will also speak for 20, 25 minutes. Afterwards, there'll be time for questions and answers, I hope. And at the end, I want to come back and talk for about 5 or 8 minutes and make a closing. And I also believe that the president of the American Friends of Roots, Zach Schaefer, will also make a short closing at the very end. I would like to begin not exactly with current events, that will come in another few minutes. I simply want to remind you, or for those of you who don't know, to tell you what Roots is. Roots in Hebrew is Shorashim, in Arabic it's Judur. We're the Israeli-Palestinian Grassroots Initiative for Understanding, Nonviolence, and Transformation. Our work is in the West Bank, also called Judea and Samaria, also called Occupied Territory, also called Palestine, also called Liberated Territory by some, Disputed Territory, Greater Israel. And all of those different names for the little sliver of land in which we do our work, I think have legitimacy. They indicate something of the reality in which we live for this group of people or for that group of people. Lots of different truths here, lots of different realities. In this place, with those various names, Palestinian Arabs live, mostly Muslim and Christian, and Israeli Jews live, Jews that are called settlers, and the two sides have absolutely no contact with each other. They're full of ignorance and stereotypes, lots of resentment, fear, and hostility towards the other side. And we in Roots know that that hostility and that fear actually kills people. People die because they're afraid. They take action because they're afraid of what the other will do to them, because they don't know, because they're ignorant, because of resentment. Roots brings the two sides together to listen to each other, to talk to each other, to get to know each other. We have created the only joint Israeli-Palestinian community center in the whole West Bank. It's the only place where the two sides can and do meet every day. Thousands of local Israelis and local Palestinians have met each other through Roots at the Dignity Center. That's what it's called. It's a community center with photography workshops and music therapy and trauma therapy and a summer camp and a day camp and programs for little kids, programs for older kids in high school, programs for our alumni. A lot of focus on interfaith dialogue, on religious celebrations of getting to know the other's religion and also getting to know the other as they live their lives. We see healing taking place at the Dignity Center through the work of Roots because Israelis and Palestinians are sick. They're sick in the heart with all the terrible things that I just talked about. And I have a name for at least one part of this disease. It's called the hubris of exclusivity. The hubris of exclusivity. And this disease coursing through our veins and infecting our blood and our minds and our hearts, it convinces us that my people are real and the other people is fake. The other people doesn't belong. They're not real. You don't have to take them into account. The other side just doesn't exist. And we begin to understand the other side, to accept the other side, to recognize the other side, to see legitimacy on the other side through the work of Roots. Now, I want to emphasize that most peace organizations for the past decades have understood that identity and religion and nationalism are the problem. Those are the things that divide Israelis and Palestinians. If those are the problems, then let's try and overcome them. Let's go beyond them. Much of peacemaking, therefore, has been about meeting the other side as human beings, going beyond identity, beyond religion, beyond politics. And Roots has taken a different approach. We believe that since religion is part of the problem, it has to be part of the solution. Because identity is part of the problem, it has to be part of the solution. Because nationalism and patriotism are part of the problem, therefore they have to be at the center of the solution. Roots works in the West Bank with the two sides that are most strongly wedded to their historical, national, religious identities. Those are the people that we work with. That's the constituencies we bring together. Palestinians who've lost loved ones in the conflict, who've been in Israeli jail, Palestinians who are from refugee families, Palestinians who are religious Muslims, people who you'd think are the enemies of peace. Those are the people that we're working with. On the Israeli side, the same thing. On the Israeli side, the same thing. Israelis who you might consider right-wing with strong Zionist religious historical identities, people who look like me with big kippot and beards, those are the people, religious Jews, that we're bringing into the discussion. And what that means is that we certainly meet the other as a human being. We discover the humanity, and it's hard. We're actually surprised very often the other side is human just like us. But we see the human being. We're surprised that we're surprised, but we're still surprised. But we go further than meeting a human being on the other side. We meet the other in the fullness of their national, religious, historical identity. And that's really, really hard. We meet each other on a level where we contradict each other. And we find their common ground. We find what we call two truths in one heart. That I belong in this land, and my people are true, my narrative is true, my history is real, but the other side is no less truer and belongs in this land no less well. I have to find a way to fit two truths into one heart. And that makes peace building at a time of war even more difficult, because we're not overcoming what brings us to war, we're actually bringing what brought us to war into the discussions, into the dialogue, into the encounter. That's an introduction. I'm going to move now to the heart of what's at hand right now. You all know, that's why you're here, what began to unfold on Saturday morning a week ago. Israel was attacked by Hamas. Looks like about 1,600 Hamas fighters, militants, terrorists, streamed over the border in the south of Israel into 22 Israeli towns and cities near the border. Also, a few army posts. They killed soldiers, but they not only killed soldiers, they killed civilians, they killed men, women, and children. They shot them, they stabbed them. Apparently, they mutilated them. It was a massacre. And Israel, it was a holiday, it was Sabbath, Shabbat. It was the holiday of Simchat Torah. During the course of that morning and that day, Israelis around the country began to receive a trickle of the news. Israel was totally surprised, both the army, the security forces, and all the citizens. The news came slowly. We didn't know what to do with it. At this point, the vast majority of Israelis, I think also many, many Jews around the world, perhaps many who are on the call now, are deeply, deeply, deeply traumatized. We are horrified. We're disgusted. We're in shock. We're overwhelmed. We are deeply, deeply hurting. And we're in mourning. I was at a funeral 2 days ago. Just about every Israeli I know has been to a funeral or more than one. We know people who've been killed. We know people who've been abducted. Hamas took about 150 hostages. One of them, a friend of mine, Vivian Silver, was a peace activist in Women Wage Peace. She's now, we have to pray for her. We don't know. We are deeply, deeply mourning in this country. And many Jews are having a flashback to the Holocaust. Certainly a flashback to the Yom Kippur War when we were surprised. And for many, we're feeling this is the worst massacre the Jewish people have suffered since the Holocaust. That imagery, right or wrong, justified or not, is coming up in our minds. We are really, really hurting. Many Israelis are angry. Many are calling for revenge. While the massacre was taking place and until today, Hamas has been raining down rockets on southern Israel and on central Israel, even on parts of northern Israel. We've been hearing the sirens. We've been running to the bomb shelters. People have been killed by the rockets. Israel has entered into a circle the wagons mentality. We feel our backs to the wall. We feel an existential threat, right or wrong, justified or not, but that's the way the national psyche is reacting. It's clear to everyone that Israel has to defend itself. Israel has to counterattack Hamas. The message of the right wing in Israel that we've heard for years, that Hamas has to be eliminated, completely eliminated, has now become the discourse of the whole country, both most of the citizens and the political level. And indeed, the Israeli politicians, whether it's the prime minister, the defense minister, others are telling us that Israel will now enter into a final battle with Hamas. Israel has begun to bomb Hamas bomb Gaza from the air. It's been almost 6 days of bombing now. In the past, Israel proclaimed that it takes a surgical approach, only trying to kill Hamas members and refraining from bombing if civilians are in the way. But now Israel is saying, yes, we're only targeting Hamas, but if civilians get in the way, there's nothing we can do about it. We have to get them until they're eliminated. That's what I hear in the radio. That's what I hear from my friends and family. That's the way everyone is talking. And indeed, over 350,000 Israeli soldiers have been mobilized, the fastest mobilization in Israel history. The troops are being amassed, and the government is telling us that Israel is about to embark on a ground operation that's going to completely eliminate Hamas. And Israel's bombing of the Gaza Strip has intensified. We hear, and I'm sure you hear, about hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who are now fleeing for their lives. We've heard of thousands of Palestinians, men, women, and children, who have been killed by Israeli bombs in the past few days. And we are gearing up, apparently, for a bloodbath. More Palestinians and Israeli soldiers, as well as Israelis on the home front, apparently going to be killed. The situation is terrible. Israel feels that it's never been in such a situation, at least since the Yom Kippur War in 1973. And under these circumstances, how does a peace organization like Roots react? So first of all, you have to know that we cannot meet Israelis and Palestinians now. Why? Because the West Bank is divided by the Oslo Accords into 3 parts, A, B, and C. Area C, which is about 70% of the West Bank, that's where Israelis live, and about 70,000 Palestinians. Our Dignity Center, of course, is in Area C, where Israelis and Palestinians can have access. Presently, Palestinian villages and towns in Area C have been blockaded by Israel. Palestinians are not allowed on the roads that connect Palestinian cities, even Palestinian cities in areas in A, B. Their connecting roads are through Area C. The roads are closed for Palestinians. The villages in Area C are blockaded. Nothing can come in and go out. Israel says it's doing it to prevent violence, prevent Israeli settlers from going in and taking revenge, preventing Palestinians from shooting at Israelis. But the result of it is that Palestinians in the West Bank feel deeply pressured, of course. Water and food and flour are running low. Apparently, the Israeli army is trying to let vital supplies in, but you can imagine that not everyone gets what they need, and Palestinians can't go to work. They're losing income. Most of them, they don't have social security. They don't have anything like that. So Palestinians in the West Bank are feeling really, really pressured, and they're feeling they're being blamed for what Hamas did. The conflict is exacerbating not just in the south around Gaza, but in the West Bank as well. I think about 35 Palestinians have been killed in clashes with the Israeli army in the last few days because of the tensions. And as a result of all this, we cannot meet. So we meet over Zoom. I'll talk a little bit later about what we've done. But I want to now put on the table the inner tensions that we are experiencing within Roots. We're peacemakers, Israelis and Palestinians. We've been working together, many of us, for 10 years. We believe, as I said earlier, in understanding, nonviolence, and transformation. Nonviolence. What does that mean in this context? We've had lots of Zoom conversations, both of the leadership and of our activists. We have discovered we can still talk to each other. We respect each other. We love each other. We sympathize deeply for each other's suffering. We want it to end, but I want to tell you and show you what we don't agree on. So I would like to put the spotlight on two major disagreements between Roots activists, most Palestinians on one side and most Israelis on the other side. Here we go. I have to prepare myself for this. So all the activists in Roots agree that what happened beginning on Saturday with Hamas fighters pouring into Israel was a massacre. It was horrific. It's to be condemned in all language. It's immoral. It's against the laws of warfare. It's inexcusable. That we agree on. And I have to tell you, that's a big accomplishment, because you probably know that certainly in Gaza and in many places in the West Bank, Palestinians are celebrating what I see and what we see in Roots as a massacre, an unjustified massacre, a horrific, inhuman massacre. And we've heard in Arab cities around the world, people celebrating. We've heard in America of Palestinians and far left-wing activists celebrating this massacre. And of course, that greatly, greatly angers us and upsets us and scares us, both Jews in Israel and Jews around the world. So we have agreed in Roots to condemn this horrific massacre, but here's the first of two disagreements between our activists. The Palestinians mostly say that the massacre has to be condemned, but there has to be a rider to the condemnation. And the rider has to say, this was a massacre, it is inexcusable, but it has a context, and it has a reason, and it has a provocation. It didn't come out of nowhere. It didn't happen in a vacuum. Hamas fighters did the terrible thing they did because they feel they have their backs to the wall. They've been suffering from the Nakba, the tragedy of 1948, since then. In Gaza, 70–80% of the people are refugees or descendants of refugees from 1948. There have been refugees for all those decades since then. They want to go home. They want their land back. And they've been living since 1967 under Israeli occupation with lack of freedom of movement and lack of human rights. That's terrible. And in the last few years, for reasons that may be justified or may not be justified, I'm going to talk about that now, Israel has been blockading Gaza. Not a lot of electricity, not a lot of drinking water. Half of the population is unemployed. It's like an open-air prison. And the Palestinians en route say that doesn't justify a massacre, but we have to understand where it came from. And the Israelis in Roots mostly say that to put a rider on your condemnation to try and explain why this massacre happened is obscene. If you put a rider on the condemnation, you may not mean to justify the massacre, but willy-nilly you are. This event beginning Saturday was so terrible, so depraved, so inhumane that no rider can go along with the condemnation. And the Palestinians say that if you don't add the rider of mentioning the occupation and the reasons for this massacre, then you're giving yourselves a free pass, as if to say that if we punish Hamas and just go back to the way things were before and everything will be okay. But it's not okay. There's still occupation. There's still Israel causing injustice to the Palestinians. So here is one divide between our activists. And now I'm going to move to the second divide among groups activists. And I hope it's clear to everyone. I'm trying not to tell you my opinion. I'm leaving that for the end. So Israel is now, as we mentioned earlier, bombing Gaza terribly. Thousands of civilians have died, and Israel is about to embark on a ground operation that's obviously going to kill, in addition to Hamas fighters, many civilians, Palestinians, men, women, and children. And the Palestinians en route say, okay, we believe in nonviolence. That's in our logo, understanding nonviolence and transformation. So what we peacemakers who believe in nonviolence have to say at this point is nonviolence. Israel should not be attacking Gaza. Israel should not be bombing, and Israel should not be entering in with ground soldiers. Roots has to call for de-escalation. We have to take the humanitarian approach. The hostages should be returned. Israel should not kill any more people. Enough killing. What is it going to accomplish? At the end of all this killing, thousands of people will die, Israelis and Palestinians, and we're back to square one. The only way to solve the conflict is through negotiations, through reconciliation, through understanding. That's the Palestinian position of most Palestinians en roots. And the Israelis say, that's obscene. Look at what they just did. They're absolutely depraved. This is evil like the Nazis, what we just saw. There's no talking to them. To talk to them is to let evil off the hook. And it's to cause more bloodshed in the future. The only way to reach peace, many of the Israelis are saying in roots, is to eradicate Hamas. And if that means collateral damage of thousands of Palestinian men, women, and children, that's terrible, and it's a tragedy, and we mourn it, but there's no choice. There's no choice. That's what many Israelis, even the leadership of Roots, are saying. And they're saying it with pain. They're saying it with tears, but saying there is no choice. Our backs to the wall. This is evil. It has to be eradicated. Peace will come later. Talk will come later. Reconciliation will come later. And the Palestinians look at the Israelis and say, how could that be? You are repudiating our values, the values we worked for 10 years of nonviolence. How could you Israelis say that there has to be now violence, there has to be attack? You call it self-defense, the Palestinians say to the Israelis, but it's not self-defense. It's lashing out in revenge. It's getting them because they deserve it, and it's not going to get us anywhere. And the Palestinians also say that, look, for 10 years, we've been restraining ourselves. We've been under occupation, and we've been telling our people, you have to fight back. You have to resist non-violently. And now Israel has its back to the wall. It's suffered this massacre, and you Israelis are not going in the direction we Palestinians have gone in calling our people to nonviolence. Israeli activists and Roots have to call their people to nonviolence. We expect that from you. And the Palestinian activists are very disappointed in the Israeli activists. And the Israeli activists are very disappointed in the Palestinian activists, because the Israelis say, but you Palestinians, you don't understand. This is depravity. This is Nazis, and there's no other way. First, we have to get rid of it. Indeed, I didn't tell you my opinion. I want to close before Noor begins and tell you that despite these serious disagreements, we still support each other, the Roots activists. We're still bringing the two sides together through Zoom daily, and we are sure that our work, no matter what happens, will be crucial the day after. Whatever happens, there has to be reconciliation. There has to be a meeting of hearts. We have to, each side, understand the depths of the other side's narrative, the other side's connection to the land, their belonging to the land. We have to respect that. We have to see its legitimacy, and we have to work for a solution that will bring justice and freedom and security, equality and human rights to this little sliver of land that both Israelis and Palestinians call home. Thank you. And I'd like to invite Noor to speak.
Noor?
Marwa and Myron, could you try to figure out what happened to Noor?
Now you can. Now he can. يلا بتقدر هلا نور.
Okay, so I couldn't unmute myself. Hello everyone. It's a very difficult, rough time that we are meeting. It was very difficult for me to hear my partner Rabbi Hanan, even after all of these years working together. And as much as balanced he's trying to be, and actually trying to speak about both sides and how both sides are feeling and what both sides are going through, is still very difficult for me to listen to Rabbi Hanan talking and explaining about what happened since Saturday. So I have been part of this work for the last 7 years, where I believe that I myself went through a process. We call that process a process of transformation, and this is not an exaggeration. It transforms you from the way how you see the other people who are living here, the people who are different from you, the people who have an identity that contradicts your identity, that you feel that they came and stole your land and live on your land. You start to actually hear their narratives and listen to their story again and again, and you start to realize the truth on their side, that it's not only on your side, but also it's on their side. And little by little, through this process that I have experienced at Roots, and the values that I was exposed to by the work that we are doing, and the vision that we have for our future together, the immediate impact of the work that we do at Roots is that you start to humanize the enemy. You start to see the people on the other side as human beings. You actually start to treat and heal from the dehumanization that we grew up with, that you only see the enemy as monsters, as beasts, as in a very inhumane ways. And so, like Rabbi Hanan explained, through those many years of us engaging together and actually living the conflict together, and as far as I believe, trying not to just coexist or create coexistence in this abnormal reality, but trying to co-resist, to resist the occupation, to work to make sure that we both have a better life and better future for our kids, for everyone living on this land. It's really a transformative process. That process that changed the way how you see yourself and change the way how you see others. So it's again another round of conflict, another round of violence between both of our people. But this time, probably we went or we sank to a worse level. We went to a level that maybe we did not maybe experienced before. I don't know. When I say this, many things come to my mind as a Palestinian. Things that I have lived growing up during the Second Intifada, and things that I have heard from past generations, from my father, from my mother, from my grandparents in 1948, in 1967. And so this Saturday morning, I woke up on the horrific news of the attack and the massacre that took place in the south of Israel on the borders with Gaza. And to be very, very honest with you guys, I didn't feel I was shocked as much as I was actually surprised. And the reason for why I say that is that for the last couple of years, doing what I do and expanding my awareness of how terrible the situation is and where we are going, the direction that we are going toward. And not only me, many people who work and still work in this field of peace building, of bridging the gap between our people and building bridges, we were actually warning that it's this situation, this conflict that we have now is being handled in a way that it's getting from bad to worse. And the politicians are not taking the responsibility to find a solution to the conflict, a peaceful solution. Many people, we feel that they actually are abandoning their responsibility, and this is what we are trying to do. We as citizens, as individuals, we are trying at Roots and other organizations to take our responsibility to work on making sure that we have a better future, as I say. So we were warning about the conflict getting worse and about bad things that will happen. And that's why I choose to say that I wasn't shocked, but I was surprised maybe of that happening now. And maybe it wasn't also a big surprise. From the beginning of this year, the violence have been escalating and rising, mostly actually in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. We have the most far-right wing government. We had episodes of animosity, of hatred, of demonization, of violence in the last year and in this year. From the beginning of the year, more than 200 Palestinians were killed in different circumstances by the occupation. So that's why I say I was feeling that something is coming and something will happen. And here it is on Saturday morning. I was surprised. I was deeply saddened. I was following the news of what's going on, and I knew that if this is another round, this is another episode where many of innocent people on both sides will lose their lives. And you can basically say, since Saturday, I have been waking up every morning, and I cannot really say that I actually am able to really to sleep and forget about what's happening. Like almost 24/7 on the news with live feed from Gaza, from that area, from what's happening around Gaza. So every morning we wake up to count the numbers of how many people were killed last night in the aerial bombardments in Gaza, and which type of weapon that now Israel used, and which areas that they have bombed. It was very obvious to me on Saturday that what's happening is an immediate reaction from the Israeli side, taking revenge of collective punishment against more than 2 million people who live in Gaza, with power being cut off, with water being cut off, basic things that actually that support life in Gaza, and that hospitals are running now on fuel that they have for a short time, and it will run out, and then hospitals will become just places where people are dying. They will not be treated. So every morning I wake up for another news about how many innocent people in Gaza are being killed. And not only that, and not only how many weapons or how new weapons are being used, but also the gap between our people. You can say the gap of knowledge. We receive different news, different facts on both sides. The propaganda on each side that is trying to basically show the other side as complete inhumane and monsters. And what actually frustrated me the most was the reaction of the international community, especially the US. You can say that I had a little bit of naivety. I was a little bit naive that that some countries will save the situation, because this is not the first round in Gaza, and we know what will happen. It's another round of revenge and violence, and that only innocent people, or mostly innocent people, will be killed in it. But what shocked me and what actually disappointed me is that governments were encouraging this conflict and encouraging the escalation of violence, and instead of asking and demanding for de-escalation. I myself realized from the first day that the right thing to be done is to call for de-escalation and for ceasefire immediately, and for release of hostages and an exchange of prisoners, negotiations. That's the only way to find a solution. That's the only way to make a solution that save lives. Any other so-called solution will be just a bloodshed that will leave thousands of innocents of people killed, and will create a new generation of people who are filled with animosity, with hatred. And in this way, we are dealing the same. We are not changing the behavior that actually led to this in the first place. We are not changing the ways how we are dealing with it in the first place. We're again continuing to ignore the core of the problem and just trying to deal with the symptoms in a way that still does not respect the identity of both sides. It's a very difficult time, and I believe that especially for us people who are trying to bridge the gap and who are trying to resist this occupation and make a better life and a better future for all of the people on this land, for Israelis and Palestinians, for Jews, Christians, and Muslims, that we now, and the work we have done so far and we still have to do, is under actually a big test. The values that we are based on, what we believe in human rights, in human dignity, in nonviolence, all of these values and principles that we have is now under a big test. But the longer this violence goes on, actually, it's very sad that the more people who are actually giving up on these values, and it doesn't seem like there is there is hope, or there is like light in the end of the tunnel. It's also sad to me that that I cannot talk in the name of Roots tonight, actually, since that my organization have failed to come up with a joint statement that denounces and condemns the violence and the targeting of civilians on both sides. But on the other hand, I appreciate so far the statements and the actions that were done by other organizations, by human rights organizations in Israel, who called for the stop of this bombardment, of this violence against civilians, and called for a release for the hostages and prisoners, and an exchange of prisoners. That's what needs to be done, and a ceasefire. I still believe that we, both sides here, are destined to live together on this land. And if we try to ignore the other side, if we try to erase the other side from this land, it will not allow us to live in security and freedom on this land until we both recognize that we both belong to this land and we both deserve to live on it, to live on this land with equal rights and dignity. Other than that, we will just continue for more and more generations killing each other. The last thing I will say, I'm not here, as I said, I'm not here talking in the name of any organization, not even Roots. And I'm not here as a representative of Hamas nor the Palestinian people. I'm only talking in my name as a Palestinian who dedicated his life for the last 7 years of my life to work for a better vision in where our people can live in dignity and humanity on both sides. That's who I am, and that's who I want to continue to be. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Noor. This is not easy for Noor or for I. I want to go back to the 2 points of disagreement between most of the Israelis and most of the Palestinians in Roots. And Noor, of course, talked quite a bit about the second disagreement. If Roots should condemn and come out against the Israeli counterattack on Hamas in Gaza. So I want to explain something about the position of most of the Israelis in Roots, something I didn't say earlier. Remember, I said at the beginning that Roots is a unique peace organization. We're not working just on the level of humanity, we're working on a level of identity, bringing together people on both sides who are deeply connected to their national, religious, historical identities. At least on the Israeli side, that means that we're just about the only organization that has managed to bring the right wing, the Israeli right wing, Israeli Orthodox Jews, Israeli settlers into the conversation, to get them to meet Palestinians and be transformed by coming face to face with the humanity and the identity and the suffering of the Palestinians. Most of the Israelis, the vast majority who come to our events, had no idea there's such a thing as occupation. Literally no idea. No idea how Palestinians live without human rights, without dignity, without freedom. No idea. And I think hundreds of the Israelis who have come to our events, meeting Palestinians, have been shocked to the core and have had to re-understand their identities, and have become, in many cases, advocates for Palestinian freedom, Palestinian rights, the end of occupation. But what this means is that Roots has to be careful not to be leaders with no followers. Our mission is to bring the right wing to understand Palestinian identity and suffering. And therefore, many of the Israelis in Roots say that on the tactical level, to come out with a statement condemning the Israeli counterattack in Gaza, we'd immediately lose our constituency. And we just, like any other peace organization that has lots of leaders but very few followers in the mainstream of Israel. I think that's a very important consideration. But in the end, it doesn't speak for me. I promised that I'd tell you something of my personal understanding, just like Noor said he's not speaking for Roots necessarily. So what I'm about to say now is speaking only for Hanan Schlesinger. I find myself in the unenviable position of not agreeing with most of my Israeli co-leaders and activists in Roots. I actually believe that on the two areas of disagreement between Israelis and Palestinians I brought up, on both of them, I find myself tending to the position that I've called the Palestinian position. I indeed think that to condemn the massacre without giving it historical context of the Nakba, the Palestinian tragedy of 1948, and without giving it the context of occupation, I think that such a condemnation is very dangerous. I think it does give a free pass to the Israeli conscience, as if the only thing wrong here is Hamas cruelty, Hamas inhumanity. I don't justify, God forbid, I don't justify the terrible things that Hamas did on Saturday and following, but I have to understand, and I think every Israeli has to understand, that there was a context to it, and I really believe that most of my Israeli citizens in our country don't understand that. They really don't understand that you can't keep Palestinians in a cage forever and expect them not to rattle the cage. Like Noor said, what Hamas did is terrible, but it fits in. I don't justify it for 1 second, but it was a form of resistance to my people's occupation. I think in a moral form, in a legal form, in an acceptable form, but it was resistance. And we Israelis, if we forget that, and we have forgotten it, we're never going to be able to take responsibility, take the responsibility we Israelis need to solve this conflict. Condemning Hamas without mentioning the context is just another step in the Israeli mentality of not taking responsibility. It's their fault. Always saying it's their fault. Of course, I'm not saying that Palestinians are not responsible. They're responsible, just as Israel is responsible. I don't know who's more responsible, who's more at blame, but I know that my people has the power, and my people has to take the first step towards responsibility. And condemning the massacre without any mention of our responsibility is irresponsible. And in saying that, I'm bringing upon myself the wrath of many of my friends in Roots, not to mention my friends who are not in Roots, and I may be bringing upon myself the wrath of many American Jews. But I can't help it. And as far as the second matter that divides Israelis and Palestinians in Roots, is this Israeli attack on Gaza to be justified, or are we to call for a de-escalation? I also find myself on the Palestinian side. I cannot condone military actions that are not only going to cause the death of hundreds of Israeli soldiers, but have been causing and will continue to cause necessarily will cause the death of thousands of Palestinian civilians, men, women, and children, and will not bring us any closer to peace. So I find myself among the very, 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 very few Israelis who don't believe in this war. The only solution is reconciliation. And that's really hard for Israel, especially now that we feel that we have justice with us. We have justice with us. America's with us. We can lash out because we've been wronged, and we can do what we need to do. I think what we need to do is not what we think we need to do. Despite these divides among the leaders of Roots, Israelis and Palestinians, and between Israelis and Israelis, I have great confidence in Roots. I believe we have a methodology and a vision that is absolutely crucial for the future of this little sliver of land. And we are going to, by hook or crook, we're going to do our very best to bring reconciliation to more and more Israelis and Palestinians, providing the human groundwork that is necessary for a future political solution. I'm going to say one more thing, and then we'll open it up for questions, perhaps some answers. I would like everyone to know what Roots is doing right now. So first of all, we are among the few peace activists on the Israeli side that have deep family and communal connections to the Israeli right wing, even the extreme right wing. And we are reaching out to right-wing rabbis, to educators, to youth leaders, with letters and with personal messages, begging them to keep calm, to let their followers go out and incite against Palestinians in Area C. And this is very, very important work, because we have now a tinderbox, not just in Gaza, not just on the northern border of Israel with Lebanon and Hezbollah. We have a tinderbox in the West Bank. And we can, and we are doing something a little bit to prevent further violence locally where we do our work. What do I mean by locally? I mean between Bethlehem and Hebron, the area that Israel is called Gush Etzion, where our Dignity Center sits. The second thing we're doing among our activists on our WhatsApp groups, Israelis and Palestinians who are talking together and sharing videos, we're urging them not to share hurtful and insightful material, reminding them not to hurt the other side, reminding them that there's a day after. We're also checking in on all our activists individually. Many of them are, both Israelis and Palestinians are telling us, this is it, the other side doesn't get it. We're going to leave. We can't bear to hear what the other side is saying. And we're asking them to calm down, to hold off for a while. If you can't look at the WhatsApp groups, don't look at them, but don't leave them. Remember that there's a day after. And there are also peace activists in Roots who are not disturbed by the other side, disturbed by their own side. Palestinians disturbed how so many Palestinians are in favor of this massacre. And on the Israeli side, we have peace activists who are crying bitter tears, seeing how their children and their neighbors are calling for war and revenge. And these peace activists on both sides feel they have no one to talk to. So we're giving them a framework to talk. We're strengthening them. We're giving them support. You're not alone. There are other people who also feel what you're feeling. Other people are not part of the Israeli or Palestinian mainstream, people who are talking and working for calm. And the fourth thing that we're doing is in the Palestinian villages that are under the siege of the Israeli army, we're trying to act humanitarianly to help people get medicines, baby formula. We're working, helping people get to the hospital, have to get there. We're both doing that directly, kind of behind the scenes, and we're trying to talk to the Israeli army to make clear to them the humanitarian cases that have come up. And we'll do more and more of that in the coming days and weeks. And of course, what we're doing is doing Zoom conversations for the activists and for those who are part of Roots, sharing, listening to the other, getting to know what we're feeling, what we're going through, in order to keep a modicum of connection and of empathy during this very, very, very difficult time. There's other things that we haven't done and we want to do. I'll mention them in the last 5 or 8 minutes of our Zoom call together. That leaves us about 25 minutes to open it up to questions. So we have 3 moderators here. We have Marwa, who is our head moderator, aided by Susanna and by Myron. So I think that what we'll do is we'll ask people to raise their hands with the Zoom, and then And then our Palestinian moderator will...
חנן, אני אולי מציעה שיכתבו את השאלות שלהם בצ'אט, ואז נוכל אתה או נור להקריא ואז נענה. זה עדיף, לא?
I don't like that suggestion. I don't find, I can't deal with the questions in the chat. I would like people to raise their hands and for you to call on them and mute them. So Mara, call on someone.
Now I saw Nisa Harris is raising her hand.
Hi. Thank you so much for the work that you do, and I really appreciate just hearing both sides. It's really enlightening, and I think it's inspired me since I've met you a few years ago with my husband, Rabbi Mordechai Harris, in Memphis at the JCC. I'm wondering how, if Hamas, how you don't view Hamas as a terrorist organization, how before your mission is complete, where people are actually talking to each other, because right now, unfortunately, they're not. I'm one of the few that can, view what you do as critical in going forward into one day us living side by side with each other. But until that is a reality, how can we trust that Hamas won't, the minute that we make peace with them, the same way that it's happened over and over in the past, how can we trust that that won't happen again in the future? Like the de-escalation, how can we say, okay, de-escalate things and then make peace, somehow work it out, and then they're just going to send rockets and send more? How do we know that we could trust that that won't happen?
Noor, would you like to respond before I do?
Yeah. So I'll just say shortly on that. It's when we talk about nonviolence, it's not a pacifist approach. When we talk about de-escalation, we doesn't necessarily mean that we have to go back to what was before Saturday. That's not at least what I mean. What happened on Saturday showed the failure of the policies and the actions that were taken by the Israeli government. Not just the failure on the security and the intelligence level, but the failure of this belief that we can dominate the Palestinians, we can put them under this siege, and we can control them. And the same goes for the situation in the West Bank, where we are living under Israeli military control, and that Israel believes that they can keep us under this control forever. See, what happened on Saturday, in a way, there was a beginning to it in this year that happened in Jenin and in Nablus. Young people, and some people my age, who were fed up with 16 years of the Palestinian Authority telling them and telling us there is negotiations and we are going to reach a peaceful solution at the end, and that the Palestinian Authority is arresting anyone who is trying to resist Israel violently, which is, of course, I know that that's not the news that you get on the Israeli side, on the Jewish side. I myself was arrested at some point by the Palestinian Authority, but that's what happens in our reality. And then we come to nothing, but to more occupation. We are far away from any solution. That's how most Palestinians feel. We have lost hope. We have lost hope on the Israeli side a long time ago, and we have lost hope in our leadership as well. So this explosion that we witnessed is a result of that. So building trust is not something that happens from what I learned. The truth is not happening one day, one night. It's a long process to work on. And when I call for de-escalation, I never mean that we should go back to how the situation before Saturday. We should not go back to the siege. We should start on a gradual process that will lead into a political process that will lead us into a solution. But the last thing I will say, coming from a grassroots initiative, I believe in the necessity of the work on the ground, the work that we do. I'll tell you one of the things that disappointed me, and it kind of hit me, when this attack was happening, I was thinking about so many things, of course, but this is one of the things. In our work for peace, we actually spend a lot of time and effort trying to basically find resources to collect money, to ask people and organizations and governments to donate for the work that we do. And I was just, again, reminded in this war how much money that the governments and organizations invest in efforts for war versus how much money they invest in actually peace and making solution. On our news, on our side, it was said that Israel received $8 billion, $8 billion US dollars in the beginning of the war as an immediate military aid from the US. And some people start to talk about the money that was released for Iran, and that some of it went to Hamas to prepare for this attack. And I remember that, I don't know if you know about this, but like for the last couple of years, we were almost like literally begging for some money to do our activities from the US government under the MEPA, under the Middle East Peace Pact, which is $250 million that goes for these peace organization work. Now, I know this is a very long answer and big answer, but there is so many things to be said, and I'm trying to just give examples on how much people actually are not really investing in peace, and governments are not investing in peace, but they are investing in more, and this is the result.
I agree with what Noor said. So I'm certain that force is not the solution. I'm certain that Hamas cannot be eliminated. We may be able to Israel may kill all the Hamas commanders, but the root causes of Hamas and the root ideology will not be eliminated. Rather, the opposite. There will be more and more Palestinians with deep, deep hatred of Israel because we, my people, killed their mothers and their sisters and their brothers and their whole families. We can't kill the ideology. We can't create peace from war and violence.
But at the same time, I feel like
so we can't. I'm sorry. There's no possibility.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I just want to go on and say.
Thank you, Nisa. I give Eli stare. I saw.
Yes, Eli Star. Yes, hello.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Noor and Hanan, for sharing. Oh, can you hear me? Am I muted? Am I okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I guess it's a similar related question. So I just want to clarify: is like, are you saying that were you against the action of Israel before the Gaza bombardment? The IDF like eliminating the terrorists that were in Israel. Would you say that they shouldn't have done that? And I guess I'm wondering, when you're saying not, I think Noor said, and correct me if I'm wrong, I may have misheard, that like when he's saying de-escalation, it's not, I guess non-violence. I guess I'm like wondering where violence plays a role, a justifiable role.
Say something.
Obviously not a desirable role. I guess I'm trying to say, like, is there a place for self-defense, and where do you see it? How do you see it? And so thank you for that's where I'd like to ask.
Important question. Let's look at this from a philosophic point of view for a few moments. In general, most of us can agree that violence is undesirable and violence is wrong. On the other side, most of us can agree that self-defense is right. Self-defense is proper. Self-defense is moral. However, what happens is the minute we allow, we people, human beings who believe that violence is usually not the right course, the minute we allow violence in self-defense, and we do allow it, and we believe in it deeply, and I do also, the minute we open the door to some violence, we create a Pandora's box in which we have to answer the question that Ellie just asked. Where is the boundary? Where does self-defense end and offense, use of violence that is wrong, begin. And there is no good, pure, exact answer to that question. That is at the very essence of the human paradox, the human moral paradox. The minute you allow self-defense, and we do allow it, and it's moral, but the minute we allow it, we have this slippery slope. Where does it end? So people who claim that Israel's attack on Gaza is part of self-defense, they have a leg to stand on. I personally don't accept that, but I think they have a leg to stand on. And I look at it differently. I say that self-defense is what happened on Saturday when Israeli forces, and on Sunday and on Monday,
autodefensa y
tried to prevent the killing of Israelis, and all of the Palestinian Hamas members who were actively trying to kill Israelis had to be eliminated. The minute Hamas members were surrounded and surrendered, our forces, understand, didn't kill them. I know that because we took about 50 Hamas war captives. So that's my answer to the question. And there's no completely clear answer to the question that's morally defendable from all sides. That's my position.
Thank you.
So I agree with what Rabbi Hanan said, and I do believe that, yeah, until the fight that was happening on Saturday itself was actually an act of self-defense that I understand, and that I understand and I agree on as a self-defense. But the moment that Israeli Air Force started to bomb the residential buildings in Gaza, the towers of Gaza, mostly people are living there. Hamas fighters are not going to live in the 14 floors high buildings when they have just launched such an attack against Israel. It was so clear to every Palestinian that targeting these towers in Gaza is a punishment for the people of Gaza. That's what it is. And then cutting off the water that night and cutting the electricity. So that's no more self-defense. That was an aggression, an attack on the Palestinian side. But also the other thing I want to add, through my process at Roots in the last 7 years, I came with the Palestinian arguments as well, that it's trying to justify Palestinian violence as self-defense. You know, what is when a settler killed in the West Bank in a Palestinian attack? My side say, but their government put them there. Yeah, they are innocent people, but their government put them in such situation. And so we give ourselves like the excuse, the moral excuse and the justification for committing violence against people, against civilians. And I had through those many years to learn, me and my Israeli partners, that the arguments and the justifications that we give for violence under the name of security, self-defense, and freedom fighting is creating mostly on the ground nothing but killing innocent people at the end.
Thank you, Noor. Todd Leach.
My name is Jane Hamilton, and I'm speaking from Westminster Presbyterian Church in Buffalo, New York. But what I say, I'm not speaking on behalf of Westminster. I'm just expressing my own views. And first of all, I'd like to offer my support and my empathy with both leaders of Roots. I am very encouraged that your personal views are proactive, because I think a lot of what has been expressed in the public has been reactive. Personally, I am rather disappointed both with the statements from Rishi Sunak in the UK and from Joe Biden in the US. And I fear that a lot of talk gets obscured by, political positions, rather than, if you like, speaking from the heart of humanity. Both those countries portray themselves as bastions of democracy, etc., and they both need to stand up and lead and show what they really mean. My grandfather served in Palestine in the First World War. Britain has some culpability for the situation we're in now, and certainly the US does. I have, I think talking about having reconciliation, I mean, that did not work well in South Africa, in spite of all the efforts of Desmond Tutu. I think one problem that you face is that most people in the world live in their own little bubble. And I think that's true of Israelis. I mean, when I wander around the country on public transport and I talk to local people, the views in Tel Aviv are obviously totally different to the, Orthodox Jewish views. The views of the Palestinians are pretty consistent. I also, coincidentally, this week was in the UK for a meeting with the Compass Rose Society, which is an outreach organisation for the Anglican Church and Dr. Justin Welby. And one of the big projects we actually support, which I'm sure you all know, is the Princess Basma Centre. And recently we had been taking children, from Gaza for 2-3 week stays to help them. When I was in the UK, we did have a Palestinian, Ayad Kumri, who spoke. And I don't wish to offend anyone here, but his view was, as long as Bibi is in power, this extremely right-wing government, that it's going to be very hard to take steps to have meaningful dialogue and to find some solutions.
Is there a question you want to ask us?
No, well, my question is, what can you do further to facilitate discussion and information gathering? And do you have does Roots have any links with the Anglican organization?
Roots does not have any links with the Anglican organization, except for the fact that Richard Sewell, the rector, I believe, of St. George's Cathedral in Jerusalem, is a member of our Interfaith Dialogue group. And he is a strong supporter of our work. We'd love to have further connections with the church. You can contact me by email or on the website. And of course, what we suggest is reconciliation, is the two sides meeting each other. Roots works on the people-to-people level. We believe that there has to be a groundswell of human beings on both sides, Palestinians and Israelis, who recognize legitimacy in the humanity and the identity and the belonging to the land of the other side. And that, if we have a critical mass, that will encourage the politicians. There has to be a lot of political work. There has to be ground work, people to people. We do the groundwork. Others do the political work. Let's take the next question.
Dr. Ruby Fintish.
Hi, thank you. So Rav Hanan is well aware I've been learning with Roots for over 4 years, and I'm involved in the Interfaith Text Study group and attending all sorts of learning with Roots. And I'm on the ground as a Jewish educator. I work nationally. And I would love for Noor and Rav Hanan to help me answer some of the most difficult questions or concerns that I'm hearing, which again, I work in a progressive lens. And so people who have always sat in the progressive space are really struggling with, if Hamas cared about Gazans, they'd release the hostages so that Gazans would have water and fuel and food. If Hamas cared about Gazans, they wouldn't have spent the last 2 years taking supplies meant for Gazans and using them to build weapons factories. If Hamas cared about Palestinian rights, then their message would be about Palestinian rights and not about wiping Jews off the map. These are the things that I am consistently hearing and facing, and I would love to hear from the two of you about how you would answer that, how you think we should be answering that. People who have really been invested in Muslim, Jewish, Palestinian, Israeli dialogue.
Noor,
okay. So I will give you some answers, but I must say, just to remind you again, that I am not the speaker person of Hamas, and but I will tell you how things are seen and understood on the Palestinian side regarding the questions that you asked. So first of all, I think that the Hamas plan basically was that when they kidnap so many Israeli soldiers and Israeli civilians, then they will use it to negotiate the release of many Palestinian prisoners, at least 500 of whom are under administrative detention with no charges against them in jail. In this year and last year, few of these administrative detentions or detainees, they actually died after almost 70 or 80 days of being on a hunger strike, that Israel refused in the case of Sheikh Khadr Adnan to release him at the end, and then he died at the end. And this is not the first time that a Palestinian, a militant or a militant organization have tried to kidnap Israeli soldiers or civilians to force the Israeli government to exchange with the prisoners. It happened in the past. The PLO or factions in the PLO did it. And it happened with Hamas again. It happened in 2008 with Shalit. And it happened in 2014. And since 2014, the Israeli government basically have been ignoring Hamas demands to go in a prisoners exchange. And they actually said that. They said that we have been waiting for the last couple of years to achieve a prisoners exchange. And the Israeli government ignored. And the Israeli public is no longer like demanding the Israeli government or applying any serious pressure for the Israeli government to get actually the bodies of the soldiers who are like kept by Hamas in Gaza. So that's why, from their point of view, from Hamas' point of view, the abduction or the kidnapping of the Israeli soldiers and civilians will be used to release prisoners. That's the only way for them that Palestinian prisoners will be released. And it's unfortunate to say that many of the Palestinian public, in my opinion, they actually saw that, that the last time the Palestinian Authority was able to free Palestinian prisoners with Israel was back in 2007, when we had negotiations with Olmert, and that's it. Since Bibi Netanyahu became in government, he never actually did such a step toward Palestinian society and the Palestinian Authority and released Palestinian prisoners from jail. So that's with the first question. And then the second question, there's a lot of propaganda. Hamas is itself, for the last 16 years, is effectively also the government in the Gaza Strip. So, and the money that comes to Hamas from Qatar, from Turkey, from Iran, on different levels. Some is actually funded its military capabilities, but some of it went to Hamas as a government that's in charge of all of the public services, of health, of education, of schools, of policing and enforcing law. So without getting into too much about like corruption and how things are being run, but Hamas, even though it's de facto the government, but it's not a government of an independent state or an independent country. The Gaza Strip is under siege. Israel has the control over airspace, sea, and land, and everything that goes inside Gaza goes actually in coordination directly and indirectly, mostly with Israel. From the point of view about like if Hamas will defend the Palestinian people or not, I think that the Palestinian resistance have always thought that what we are doing now will basically secure protection for our people, but not immediately, but on the longer term. Of course, our people are suffering under the occupation. And when we try to resist this occupation and oppression, will be suffering more, but this suffering will come to an end once we achieve the end of the occupation. And I know that many people in the West, they hear about, Hamas' ultimate goal and only goal is to destroy Israel as a Jewish state. But there's a huge change that happened, which needs a lot of time to talk about, and you can read about the topic if you are interested. There's a lot of change that happened in the movement itself, because Hamas at the end is a movement. There are streams of ideologies or thinking, different schools of thinking inside Hamas. Hamas officially, by 2015, changed their charter, and they say they accept a Palestinian state that's consistent with international law and the 1967 borders, but they, as a party, as an organization, don't have to recognize the state of Israel. The Palestinian government can do, but they will not do it. So you can read more about Hamas and what they are actually saying, what they are doing, and I think it's important. And I think it's, someone said in the question before that the Israelis, and I will say the Palestinians, we are living in our own bubbles, and we are not trying to educate ourselves about the other side enough. So, yeah, I'm sorry for the long answer, but there's a lot to talk about these things.
I would like to add just one thing to what Noor said. Obviously, I'm not a spokesman or apologist for Hamas, but it seems to me very clear that from the perspective of Hamas, they are working for the good of the Palestinian people, because they would say that more important than water or making a good living or having enough money is dignity and freedom. Next question.
Thank you. Jesse Kleinman.
You're on mute.
Unmute yourself, please.
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so I've got a feeling that, yes, is context, but it seems like there's context for what Hamas did, but that somehow doesn't make it any better or any, I mean, I still believe in unilateral condemnation of it, but because there's also, it could also be said there's context for why Israel engaged in the Nakba in 1948. In fact, you could even say, from a historical perspective, that there's context for why Hitler came to power in Germany.
Please ask. We only have a few more minutes. Ask a question.
Oh, so how do we deal with that? It's very hard for me to come up with how to voice my, on the one hand, disagreement, condemnation of Hamas, but also continue to support a peaceful solution, including to the problem in Gaza.
All I can say is that from the perspective of roots, both sides have to understand and recognize the historical experience of the other side. The fact that I am right doesn't mean you're wrong, and the fact that you're right doesn't mean I'm wrong. There are two true experiences here. Both sides have suffered from the other side. We can't go back in history and figure out who did it first. It doesn't matter. Both sides have done tremendous wrong to the other side. We have to put an end to it by each side recognizing the legitimacy of the other side's basic human and national historical claims to the same piece of land.
I'll just say, Hanan, that responding to this question, considering the context is definitely very, very important and crucial, because that will help us to, first of all, zoom out and not just look at what happened today or yesterday, because this conflict had been going on for a long time, and we should be asking ourselves why this conflict is happening until now, and what needs to be done for it to be solved, and sincerely what needs to be done, and try to start to understand the roots of this conflict. That's why we are talking about the context, because we don't want to just stick with the symptoms of the conflict and only try to find like a beautifying solutions to the ugly situation, like trying to just work on the layer outside and not really work on the roots of this conflict. That's why to understand the context is very, very important.
I'm going to close for 2 or 3 minutes, and then Zach Schaefer, the president of the American Friends of Roots, will close for the last 2 minutes. I said I would tell everyone things that Roots has to do in the coming weeks and months, things we haven't done yet, but we have to do them. One is we have to support financially Palestinian peacemakers. There's a lot of Palestinian participants in Roots who are out of work because of this war, because of this violence. Their income is gone. And as opposed to Israelis who have social security, we call it here national security, Bituach Leumi, most Palestinians have nothing. We in Roots want to show our Palestinian peacemakers that we support them, that we need them, that they're important to us, and that the work that they're doing is crucial. So we need the financial resources to support them in the coming weeks and months. Number two, we in Roots want to support the Israelis from the villages and towns near Gaza that were attacked, who have now been evacuated all over Israel. They are living in temporary quarters. Many of them, I don't know if it's 5%, 10%, have been evacuated to Gush Etzion, to the area where our Dignity Center is. In other words, 5 minutes from where I live and where the Roots Center is, we have, I think, 150 Israelis who are living away from home. It may be for weeks, it may be months. They need our support. So we want to support Palestinian peacemakers. We want to support the Israelis who've been attacked. And lastly, and finally, and know that it's important, we want to ensure the survival of Roots. Because of the present situation, all of the groups from the US and from England and from around the world who visit our center every day and every week and every month and provide about 15 to 20% of the Roots income through the fees they pay, that's all gone for October, November, December. $30,000 to $40,000 shortfall for Roots. In addition to that, we're probably going to lose a lot of expected donations because people are giving their money, justifiably perhaps, to other things, humanitarian causes at this time. So if we don't raise something in the vicinity of $100,000, there's a danger that we won't be able to continue our work the day after. So we're involved now in trying to raise this money. Those of you who are able to spread the word and support us, our website is friendsofroots.net, friendsofroots.net. Please help us as much as you can. And of course, if you're not on our mailing list, on the website, friendsofroots.net, join our mailing list to hear about the work we're doing and other Zoom events that we may do. And I'll also mention that we speak in the US once or twice a year, myself and Noor, in synagogues, churches, mosques, universities. We'll be in the US February 18th to March 7th, February 18th to March 7th. And through the website, you can invite us to speak in your community. We charge a speaking fee, and that's an additional way in which we meet our budget. So please bring our voice to your community. And in doing so, you'll also be helping us to continue the work. I hope that Zach Schaefer is here on the call someplace. And I hope that Zach will be able to close the event.
Hello, everyone. I obviously want to give a lot of thanks to Noor and Hanan for this conversation. And I want to provide just a zoom out of framing for all of us who are not in the region. Many are tempted today and in the coming days and months to demonize and dehumanize Jews and Israelis, Palestinians or Muslims. We'll be tempted to see the other side as subhuman. We'll be tempted to forget the intrinsic humanity of the people who are in this conflict, who are not abstractions, who are not numbers, who are not characters in the news, but are human beings who we're hearing from right now. And our communities are going to incentivize discourse that is going to ask us to choose a side. All we can do in the diaspora, in these other communities, right, the fight that we have is one against this hatred and this rage. It's one that's trying to hijack our humanity. And why I love the work of Roots, especially in a moment like this, regardless of your attachments to Israel and Palestine, regardless of your identities and the pressure that we're feeling internally from our communities and from our hearts, right, to have this imaginary other. Roots is teaching us that those lines aren't real. This idea that there can be two truths and two people in one heart, that these differences at the end of the day are arbitrary. And I'm so grateful that at a time of polarization, at a time of increased violence and hatred, when there seems like there is no light out of the tunnel, when the things we hear about and read in the news are language that demonize and dehumanize, we have leaders on the ground in the heart of the conflict, in the heart of the pain and the trauma of this moment, who are reminding us all of the humanity of everyone on the ground in the region. So I want to just thank them for giving us the inspiration and the hope and the love to have this compassion in these difficult times. And I just want to also reiterate what Hanan said, which is that many people right now are donating, as they should be, to immediate humanitarian crises that require urgent financial aid. But these civil society organizations like Roots are going to face a huge shortfall in donations and in support because of this shift in priorities, because of people who don't believe that people-to-people work is possible, because of people who don't believe that this work of reconciliation can happen in the time of conflict like this. But here we see two brothers across different sides and communities, even in this moment of pain, who can come together and speak from a shared place of humanity. And the work that our team is doing on the ground is instrumental in de-escalating tension, in reducing violence, and in ensuring that these communities, that our communities can still talk to each other. So I just want to name that the hardest work to be done in the months ahead is not just those who are fighting this war, but it's those who are trying to move beyond the fight of this war and who are trying to bring these communities together. So I really just want to affirm to everyone, I'm going to be making another donation to Roots when this call ends. This work has never been more important, the work of humanity, life, and reconciliation. So I really beg of everyone here, if you want to know how to support people on the ground, if you want to know how to support both sides and how to try to bring people together, I cannot think of a better organization to support than Roots. So with profound gratitude to the team on the ground who are doing the impossible in an impossible situation, we here in America and elsewhere, thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Stay in contact with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Hanan. Thank you, Noor.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hanan, thank you, Noor.
We'll see people from.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Is there a way to get more perspective if we have questions?
Do you mean tell me what you mean by that?
Like for me to have further conversations and give more support for others, to have conversations with y'all. I would need to better understand your perspective on human shields, or your perspective on why other countries haven't helped, and why it's all on Israel. You know, if they've been stuck for 90 years as refugees, like we understand them as Gazan refugees for 90 years, you know, and there's nobody else in the world that's been a refugee for 90 years, that kind of thing. It would be helpful to understand the narrative better.
So you could write to me by email, you can write to Noor, but I also take it just to respond to what you said. There is one other people that have been refugees for more than 90 years, and it's the Jewish people. Zionist movement based on the fundamental understanding that despite the fact we've been out of our homeland for 2,000 years, we're still refugees. Israel was founded only because of that sense that we're still refugees. We're in limbo. We don't belong in Eastern Europe. We don't belong in England. We're guests in America. So if we have understood, we Jews, that we have the right to come home after 2,000 years, then we Jews should recognize, I believe, that the Palestinians have the right to come home after only 80 or 90 years.
And I could agree, and that's why I appreciate that the work that you two are doing, so that we could appreciate that we both deserve to be here. And if we hear each other's side, then we recognize that there is a way that we could live peacefully together. But right now, to understand the other pieces that I had mentioned would be helpful.
Yeah. So
could you please give your email?
Please give your emails, you and Noor.
In the chat? Oh, you and Noor.
Let's put them in
Not
the chat.
yet. Yeah. Hanan and Noor. I'm on the phone. Please state them.
Oh, she wants you to state them.
I will do that.
Hello?
So I shared my email in the chat.
My email
I can't see the chat.
My email is ravhanan@gmail.com. Rav Hanan is
Thank you.
R-A-V-N-A-N.
Yeah.
Obviously, Noor and I have to say that if everyone writes to us, we won't be able to answer. I already get more emails a day than I can answer, and I feel terrible about that. I will always try, but it's getting impossible.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Can I ask very quickly what the connection between Roots for Peace and Friends of Roots is as far as organizations go?
Yeah, Roots is the organization on the ground. The full name is Roots Shorashim Judor, whereas Friends of Roots is the organization in the U.S. that is a sponsor and raises money so that people in America could give donations tax-free, and then the money is transferred from Friends of Roots in America to Roots in Israel-Palestine.
Thank you very much.
Our website is called Friends of Roots, but it's really the website of Roots.
Will you guys send out an email with a link to this recording and the link for people to donate? That would be great for us to just then share with our networks.
Well, the link to donate is just send out the newsletter that we sent a few days ago.
It would be great if we could also share this conversation with people.
So we recorded it, and I think that we will publicize the link. I'm not 100% sure. Instead of publicizing the link, perhaps we'll decide to just do another event. I'm not sure which is better, or perhaps both of them. I have to think about it.
I think that doing the conversation might help us, encourage people to join in and perhaps invite others to the next event, because you have a core group, but I think the goal now is to really expand the conversation and the network.
Well, Catherine, you're saying that it would be better to have a repeat event of this one?
I mean, I think it's great to do this, but I think in order for that to be successful, it would be great if we could share this recording to engage people.
Got it. Okay, I'm tending in that direction, and I will strongly consider it.
Okay, and lots of love to both of you and everyone.
Thank you to everyone.
I highly agree that it would be wonderful to get this recording to our communities. What Noor had to say, what you had to say, were very, very clarifying in terms of where is the agreement, where isn't the agreement, and your courage to step forward and say, I don't agree with the majority of my colleagues. I think that's profound. And I just keep doing it.
Completely agree. I mean, there are plenty of people who are cowering and silent because they don't want to be unfriended on social media. Yeah. And expressing their opinions, and you're doing it where it has real consequence for you, and that is courageous. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bless you. Take care.